So today, we're going to talk about relationships. I think, successful relationships, are they possible? Can you have a long-term relationship? You know, I
Can
know,
you?
I know you said this already, but you and Trev have been together forever. And, obviously you shared that already. I said that. Um, But what has made it successful? Is there one super important factor that you think you can pinpoint?
Well, for a long time, we said we would just kind of stay together because neither one of us wanted all the kids.
Right?
So it just seemed, we're just white knuckle it till
Yeah.
the end. No, but honestly, a lot of relationships do that,
Hmm.
But I think with Trev and I, we did meet really young, so there was a part of us that grew up together, And I do think for us that was maybe a pretty big factor. And generally speaking, it doesn't work for people like that.
Yeah.
But um, I do think that we really did a lot of work, even though we didn't understand it's what we were doing, but just the emotional intelligence part of it. I think I had to learn myself really fast that what respect meant,
Hmm.
like respect for going both ways and being not humiliating each other, not, I don't know how to say that, but I see that a lot in relationships
Yeah.
where um it's kind of the you me
Hmm.
thing. It's like some people have to kind of always be better than the next person or point out flaws or point out mistakes, and it's almost like humiliating in that way. And I say the same thing about parenting,
Yeah.
right? People ask, like, why do you have such a good relationship with your kids? And it's because I did not shame
Yeah.
parent them. I did not
Yeah.
have to be better than them. I did not have to
Nope.
prove them wrong and me right. And in partnerships, it can be like that. It's really hard sometimes to bite your tongue when he's wrong and you're right and you know it and he knows it. But it's like
No.
there's no point in pointing that out, because the only thing it's meant to do is hurt the other person and make them feel embarrassed, and that's never a good feeling for
No.
anybody. So I think a big part of our relationship, and it certainly has not been perfect, honestly. There's been lots of times where we both had to sit down together and separately and decide if this was what we wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's healthy. I think if you do that in a healthy way, people grow um, and change.
Yeah.
So we are not the same people we were when we met when we were kids, and then when we had kids, babies ourselves when we were in our 20s.
Yeah.
We're very different people now.
Yeah.
And I always think to the kind of three levels of relationships. And I can't remember who I learned this from, so I can't really source it. But, the first level of relationship is very much about what can I get out of it,
Hmm.
right? It's very much about, I want my needs met. Whatever it takes, I'm going to meet my needs. And you see people out there dating now, and that is how they look at it.
I,
It's about me. I want my needs met, and I get that to
yeah.
a degree. Um, but it's very much about me. And as soon as my needs are not met, I'm moving on,
Yeah. And
right? So it's not really reciprocal.
no, and I think, like, not to just sort of cut into your story, but like I don't know how people date nowadays. Like
Mm.
it's crazy.
It does. I mean, we should do a whole episode on that, because we both have adult children that are in this
Yes.
stage, right? They're doing that. But the second level of relationship is transactional. So it's very much about I love you, and I want to give you what you need in your life and as a person, but I also need what I need. And so let's find this transactional, like I'll give you some of what you need so I can have some
Yeah.
of what I need. And a lot of and that's not necessarily unhealthy, but many relationships just stay there, right? And it becomes this kind of roommate situation. It can, because it's transactional, it can lose a lot of that sort of uh passion, spark, like the romance side of it. It
Yeah.
can become very functional. And it can become so functional that it works, right? That people don't really recognize what they're missing sometimes until later. And often relationships are in that space
Mm-hmm.
while they're raising kids,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and because you just get into autopilot, things have to be done. The romance side is almost like a luxury you
Yeah.
don't even remember you should have, right?
But it also
And
seems, sorry, it just also seems
no, that's okay.
convenient, right? It's just,
It's convenient. Yeah, it's convenient, but the problem is that we are biological animals, right? So we're going through the function of this relationship. We are missing the intimacy side of it, maybe not even realizing that we're missing the intimacy side of it. And so underneath there's like resentments building up on both sides that you might not even notice until you're kind of at a critical point, right?
yeah.
And so the third level is where, I don't know what it's called, but it's where you want what your partner needs becomes very important to you, because they are not going to move to their higher self. They're not going to move to being the best version they can be if they don't have that, right?
Yeah.
And so you'll actually sacrifice things in your own life, and I don't mean in a fully negative way, but so that they can be happy, so that you can give them what they need. And it's less about transaction. It's more about like, it's okay for me to take a step back so that you can do this or have this because it's going to fulfill you in some way. And ideally there's give and take, right?
Yeah.
But many relationships doesn't mean that both partners are always in level 3. You can kind of bounce between, but partnerships in level 1 don't make it at all. Partnerships in level 2 can make it, but likely that's where you see people stepping outside of a relationship. That's where you see resentment building. It's when you sort of get to the point where you care so much about that person and their own growth that you'd actually be willing to let them go if it was better for the relationship and better for them.
Yeah.
But, obviously, if you're that kind of awake and you're that aware, and your partner is too, then you're building something new that's kind of beyond the transaction. And I think that's like, Trev and I grew so much through these phases, and often women will have almost growth spurts that outpace a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like no shade to men, that it's just sort of the way it is sometimes. And we saw this like in our grannies eras, right? Like the women did not, if they went back to school or they did something, you would often see men being very insecure and very worried that their partner was out there doing those things. And even in our generation, that's very true. I can think of many friends who, as the kids started growing up and the woman started to advance herself in some way, it was very threatening to the man.
Mm-hmm.
And relationships will break up because of that. But with Trev and I, he was very supportive, and he was not just that, but he would help find ways to make the things work,
Yeah.
so that I could do them, right? And so I think it was very much about like respecting what I needed and me respecting what he needed. And that's maybe a long-winded, we may have to cut half of this, but a long-winded way of saying that I think that respect was such a huge part of it, and like really genuinely caring about the other person. And I kind of joke about this, but it's true also. I learned very early on, I was super volatile at the beginning of our marriage. Like I'd fly off the handle and I'd have all these like fits. I'm a pretty calm person now, but I wasn't then. And he would take the brunt of that, my little like tantrums. But I learned early on that first of all, I never wanted to hurt his spirit. That was a big thing for me, is like, actually what your words can bite so deep, and sometimes people can't get past that.
No.
And I know that from my childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
The words that people say can stay with you forever.
Absolutely. You can't, and
so
you can't take it back, right? You can't make it better sometimes.
Yeah, you can't unring a bell.
Yeah.
And so that was a guiding principle for me. I didn't always get it right, but it certainly was in my mind. And the second one was I never wanted to say something that I had to apologize for because apologizing was so hard.
Oh,
You know, I'm an emotionally intelligent person, so I will apologize, and I've tried to teach my kids that that's such an important skill, is being able to humble yourself and apologize. But man, it bites and I
oh,
don't like it and I don't want to do it. So I always try to, like, if we're going to get into it in some way, I don't cross that line.
yeah. I
Or
think
try not to. Maybe there's things I should apologize for that I haven't yet, but
I get accused of like doing this like dance around, and then it's kind of like an apology in my own way without apologizing.
but not really.
No,
Yeah, both our partners are going to watch this
I know.
episode and be like, "What are you talking about?
Well,
That's not,
he's
you don't do
well
any
aware.
of those things."
I'm told it all the time. So, you know.
uh yeah,
Yeah, it
it's just
was.
the relationships are hard, and
Mhm.
you know, making them last is even harder.
Oh, right. But I think for you, I could maybe have called it because I think didn't didn't he like take a bus to British Columbia to meet you?
You were there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I was living at Ricky's grannies. Grandma, who's grandma? I was living at Ricky's grannies across the country. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, from Saskatchewan to BC, but some people won't know where that is.
No.
Um, and Ricky was young. You were what, maybe 10,
I think
11,
something like
something like
that.
that?
Yeah.
12, I don't know, somewhere in there. And also living at your granny's. And so, yeah, I was working there. I was 18 years
Hmm.
old, taking a bit of a gap year. Turned out to be a gap 3 decades, but whatever. Yeah, Trevor, not only did he take a bus from Saskatchewan, which was like, I don't know, 30, 40 hours. I have
Oh,
no idea how
yeah.
long the bus ride took. But he had come directly from a wedding, and so he had stuffed his suit into a diet. It changed in the bathroom on the bus from his suit into like bus clothes. And so, yeah, and when he got there, I mean, I didn't know he was going to propose.
Yeah.
But he did. And yeah, and you were like one of the first people, and
Yeah.
Ricky was a candle lighter in our wedding. And so maybe
Yes.
at some point some pictures will
I
show up
really
from
hope
that.
not, because if I recall,
I'll always remember your haircut.
oh,
Yeah.
that wasn't
And
even my
sadly, I put you in
fault.
a really ugly dress. My candlelight dresses and bridesmaid dresses were hideous.
I know,
Like
but
3
my
words.
hair
Horrible.
at that time was like, I don't like, I went in for a perm because, back then that was a thing.
Because that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had gone in, but I had wanted like not this perm that pulled my hair up to here. And oh, it was so bad. It was so bad. It was one of those times I wish I could
I can't
erase.
remember it. It's probably not as bad as you think.
Oh no,
It
it's
might
bad.
be, and we're gonna find
No, no.
out. But
No, it's bad.
yeah,
I'll Photoshop
That's
hair onto that photo because it's
see,
bad.
my wedding pictures, I don't have many of them because we did not have a good photographer, and most of them were blurry. But the ones that were not blurry is me doing this.
Oh,
So I don't even have any good wedding pictures. So if any of our cousins out there have wedding pictures, please send them.
mm-hmm.
You can send yours too, but also if you have any of me, that'd be great.
You don't need to look for me at all.
If you see Ricky, please circle her in red and send it into our Facebook page.
Oh, well, private message only.
Actually, send them directly to me,
Oh, no.
and I'll make sure they're properly utilized.
No, because Maddie could probably do some great stuff with that.
She can fix your hair.
Oh, I hope so.
Maddie's my daughter and our editor and our graphic designer and our
Our
style guider.
yeah. Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Trev coming. I remember your wedding, but not much. I don't know.
Because you were distracted by your weird hair.
I think it was the curls. It just sort of like took my brain out. was bad.
Well, that's okay. We all have those moments for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And how about you? Tell us all about your
Ah,
supportive spouse, your deep, everlasting relationship. Tell me.
yeah.
Tell
I
us.
don't know. It's
Give us the tea.
it's weird because it doesn't seem that long ago that we got together. You know, we got back together, or we got together in 98. So 26 years ago. We've been married for 22. Um, but, you know, um, I don't know. I
Time
think we've
flies.
just sort of like learned how to walk together, you know, and work off
Mm-hmm.
of each other. And, if you're having a bad day, you kind of can piggyback off the other one because they're supportive and they can help. And then you kind of trade places and, he'll piggyback off of me and my strengths and, kind of work together. Um, I think I've been very fortunate to say that, I married my best friend because,
Mm.
I love spending time with him. He obviously loves to spend time with me more. Um,
Obviously.
yeah, you know. But I think in our unique situation with our kids, having a strong partner it's essential,
Mhm.
you know. Um, Not every moment is easy. And so sometimes you need somebody else to help you. And we work really well together. And um, it's that shared strength and understanding that allows us to kind of, face whatever comes our way. And I think
Mhm.
we have really great communication skills. Um, we don't really fight that often. I mean, we might bicker, but nothing really big, right? And so I think I think that's a big thing. We talk to each other, not talk at each other. And we listen when the other person's talking. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that those are, you know, some some really strong qualities in our relationship. Um,
Well, it sounds like genuine care,
mhm,
right? Like it sounds like genuine care and back to that respect word,
yeah.
right? Where it's like mutual. Because I think like Trev and I don't really fight either. And even back when we fought, it was me
Hmm.
fighting, not him.
Hmm.
It was me having whatever, but he just never kind of fought back.
Hmm. I
And I think I'd like us to do some research into this and do another episode on it, but I have heard that there's a lot of people out there who think it's unhealthy to not fight. And I would argue that. Like
mhm,
I would, because and maybe it's more around the definition of what fighting is,
yeah.
like what that looks like. And I think back to Granny and Grandpa, and I mean, we were not in their private
No.
lives, right? Like we were around a lot and stuff. And I know that speaking of like Granny Rosella and Grandpa Dave, I know it wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
Like you heard, like, even as adults and stuff, you learned a little more. Like no relationship is
No.
perfect. There's always something.
Yeah.
But I never saw Granny and Grandpa not care for each other. And like even as when they were super old, they were flirty and and sort of into that.
They were very
But
flirty. Granny Rosella and
yeah,
Grandpa
just
Dave, I think.
TB.
you know, um, I remember very vividly. One time we were over at the
Oh no.
farm.
Is this restricted? Is this
No,
XXX?
it's
Are
not
we
so
okay?
restricted, but I think maybe at
Okay.
my age, I felt it was completely inappropriate. you know,
Oh no.
well, they were
Tell us.
they were quite a bit older. Um, and Grandpa, he went to the bathroom for one of his special trips, and he went in and comes out, and he comes out, and Granny Rosella is sitting there, and we're all around, like in a circle, talking. And he walks up to her, and he's like, says something to her in her ear, and he starts like rubbing like up her shirt and into like her back, and he's kind of like rubbing back and forth.
They're like, whoa,
And
let me
I'm like,
claw my eyes out.
what is happening here? And all of a sudden, like you can see Granny Rosella's trying to talk, and he's kind of bothering her, and he turns to her and he goes, I'm feeling frisky tonight.
Oh,
She's like, Dave,
no.
what? And like just kind of like slapped his hand away. But as a
Oh my
young
God.
kid, I was like, that was completely inappropriate. But I just remember
I kind of
always
feel
seeing that. Like they always were so gentle and loving and
you were affectionate.
respectful
Yeah.
of each other,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah, I remember that too.
yeah. And it was just, you would see that all the time. And it was just, it was so nice to see. And then even
And you
too,
got
like
the
with
sense
Granny
that
and
he
Grandpa.
adored her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just seems like we were really lucky to have grannies who, had spouses that were respectful and loving and caring and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I remember when I met Trev, like they kind of say you marry your dad, right? Or like you can marry somebody who's got those personality traits. And my dad was the quietest man on the planet.
Yeah.
Like he might say 2 words in a day. He was very kind,
Hmm.
like very kind man, but he was just very, very quiet. And I remember when I met Trev, I was grade 7. I was grade 7, and the church that we were a part of was going on a youth group trip. So we were going from Saskatchewan to Banff, and it was my first youth group trip. I had made one friend. Her name was Jeanette. I was pretty outgoing. Jeanette was a little quieter, but I said, let's find cute boys and sit near them.
Yeah.
That was the plan. And I liked kind of dark-haired guys. And I mean, what do you know? What do I like?
No.
I'm 12, like whatever, right? But that in my mind,
Hmm.
that's what I liked. And so sure enough, there was 2 boys, and they were boys sitting in a row in the bus, and one had dark hair and one had blonde hair. And I thought, okay,
Yeah.
here we are. And we sit in front of them, and I'm like, we're giggly and whatever. And these guys turned out, we had lots of kind of funny jokes and stuff. And it turned out that the blonde one was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like he made me laugh the entire time. And we were inseparable.
Yeah.
We were inseparable. That was Trevor. I mean, we broke up during like high school, and you don't date when you're 12, so that dating for us just meant like being at youth group at the same time.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden we were super like nerdy churchgoers, because that's the only time our parents would all let us see each other was when we were at a church thing. So all of a sudden I'm sure both of our parents were like, why do they want to go to church all the time?
Yeah.
Like,
How many times
but
can you go for, youth group?
well, it was like all of a sudden we wanted to go to Sunday morning service and Sunday evening service,
Yeah.
and then they'd have a midweek service, and then they'd have Friday youth group, and like that was the only time we could really see each other until later when we had we had cars or bus fare jobs or
Yeah.
whatever. So that was sort of how. But Trevor is like my dad in many ways. He's not super quiet, but he's very thoughtful.
Mhm.
He will not be provoked easily into, he's pretty steadfast.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways that was my dad too, very quiet but strong opinions,
Yeah.
knows exactly what he thinks about things.
Yeah. I think it's strange because Rob is nothing like my dad. However, he's very much like my grandpa, a watcher, very quiet, a bit of an introvert, very hands-on. He likes to build things, he likes to fix things. So very much like my grandpa. Very much. Not like my dad. My dad was very
Yeah.
outgoing, like me, a great storyteller, like me. And, but yeah, Rob is he's definitely like my grandpa. you know. Um, and
Yeah.
just lets me talk and talk and talk and talk some more.
Do the thing.
Kind of like
Yeah.
Grandpa let Granny, you know. She would
Yeah,
always,
it's when we get quiet, our partners are
oh
nervous.
yeah.
Like,
Well, Granny
yeah.
would when she would travel, she was like, if I wasn't the one to talk in the car, there would be no conversation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, that's exactly.
Yeah. And I think, in this episode we're talking about like relationships, and I know we'll have more episodes where we go deeper into other questions. We're hoping people will send us questions about this. It's something we both feel we want to support people to have strong relationships. But I think back to sort of the era, and I know like with our grandparents and stuff, there was a lot of social pressure, religious pressure, stay with the person, right? But there also is something to be said for, you know, they came from a generation where you fix it, you don't throw it
Yeah.
away. And that meme has been around and stuff, so it's not the first time I'm sure people have heard that, but it really resonates with me that a lot of people just don't really take the time or have the confidence to fix something. And people do make mistakes, and people do, and definitely there are mistakes in relationships that maybe somebody can't get past, and that's okay, but
Well, I think it's about the
there's also
work.
something about growth,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, being able to do the work and being able to. And I think there's been times in our relationship, and I can honestly say that I thought he needed to do the work and he needed to change and he needed to do that, make that effort. And I realized that it was me.
Yeah.
I just saw a TikTok, a woman I follow, and she was talking about how she cut off her parents for toxic behavior, right? So you hear that a lot these days. You cut somebody off, you don't tolerate the toxic behavior, and you set your boundaries, and that's all fine, all great. Until
Yeah.
she realized years later that she was the toxic one, that she
Hmm.
was the one that had been bringing this sort of toxicity into their relationship, and she had to work through that and make amends with her parents
Yeah.
and her family because of that. But sometimes we just don't have the self-awareness to know,
No.
you know.
No. Yeah.
But Granny was, as you say, she was the glue.
Hmm.
Both our grannies, they
Yeah.
were the heartbeat and center of our family, and they're both gone. And that's actually been like it's left a really big
Oh,
hole in our lives.
yeah.
And I mean, don't get emotional. We're
Nope.
not doing that. But it is part of what's inspired this, because we want to carry this on,
Yeah.
right? And neither one of us are grannies yet, but
I better
we wanted
not.
to start.
No, thank you.
But we are at that stage where I think we learned a lot from our grannies,
Hmm.
and we want to be able to share that,
Yeah.
and we want to be able to have fun with all of you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have any like advice from Granny? I don't even know where we're at with time, so but
I'm
we'll
not
just
too
keep going.
sure.
I know I have a story I want to share, and I don't know if you do too, but
Um,
um any advice from Granny, you know, from either
I would,
Granny,
well,
Rosella or
I know
Carol.
Granny Carol. I can't really recall anything specific. Um, but when we were going through the diagnosis of our son, we were just trying to find ourselves. Um, and one thing that Granny told me was, you need time for yourself. You need time to just be Rob and Ricki and
Mhm.
unwind. So I don't care what it takes, but you need to pack your bags and you guys need to go away. You need to step away from everything
Mhm.
that you're juggling and going through and all of that stuff. And it's something that not only was fantastic advice because, you know, we started going away once a year, just the two of us. And it's probably been one of the best things we could have done for our relationship.
Mhm.
Because we get to be Rob and Ricki. We're not mom and dad, and we're not well, I think we're more able to let loose, right? And not be so focused on everything at home. So I think that that was one of the things that stuck with me because she just always made a point of taking a minute and it being about us, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So,
It's awesome advice.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. Do you remember
Yeah,
anything
I
particular?
do. And yeah, and it's not specific about relationship, but I think it was more related to the relationship I had with
Hmm.
myself. So I struggled with confidence when I was young, like a lot, even raising my kids and sort of, and I had this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. I was always starting things, I was always doing things. I definitely have a bit of a Renaissance personality. Like I'm pretty good at some stuff and but I like to move forward and I like to learn, and it's a little ADHD at
Yeah.
times, but I remember, being at home with the kids. I started little businesses. I wrote a 70,000 word novel while waiting at the bus stop for my kids. And I thought these things were really normal, but I had this almost like frenetic panic that I wasn't doing enough,
Hmm.
and it's this productivity monster, right? You get caught in that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that, and but I was raising kids and I didn't want to like sacrifice and be a bad mom, or at least what I thought would be a bad mom. And I remember my granny saying, like, Raelene, you can do all the things you want to in your life. You just might not do them all at the same time.
Yeah.
And there was something very freeing about that statement for me. Clearly, it made an impact because
Yeah.
I remember it all these years later. But it was almost like a big weight off my shoulders that, wait, I don't have to do them all today. Like,
Yeah.
I can just choose and start working towards some things. And that actually really shaped my life in the way it's gone. And I know as we get into more episodes of the podcast, we'll talk about some of those um, personal growth and development that we've had. But I think for me, it was a huge turning point and almost like an anchoring piece for me to be like, okay, this is my home base and this is how I can grow,
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the things I'll always remember that Granny told me.
Well, and I think it's good advice, right? Because I know even for myself, just wanting to do 50 million things all of the time and then feeling like I'm running out of time. It's
Yeah.
not about doing everything at one time. It's, getting to it when you can,
Hmm.
and it being more of an appropriate time.
Yeah. Well, and even things like going back to school, right? Like Granny Rosella didn't start university until she was in her 40s,
Yeah.
and neither did I,
Yeah.
right? So it was like that example too of, and we talk about our grannies, but they certainly are not the only strong women in our
No.
lives. We've had some amazing examples
Yeah.
um of just and men too. Like it's not
Yeah.
just about the grannies, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um
I think for myself, I've been pretty fortunate. I've had some really strong women in my life, not just, my granny Carol and Granny Rosella. I had my other granny, my dad's mom, and she too was a super strong lady. And so I
mhm.
cherish that as well because I got it from all angles. And, they were all like the anchor and the glue and sort of that, the matriarch, that everybody looks up to. And so I was really fortunate
Mhm.
that way my whole life to have, those strong women in my life. There's
Yeah.
others too, but those are
Mhm.
probably the three that you know, that
Yeah.
stand out.
I think, before we go into break, I think one of the things I really want to acknowledge, and I've seen this because I have 5 kids, and they've all had friends over the years, and you meet the kids in school, and there is a lot of people who don't have the strong women, don't have those people in their lives that have guided them in that way. And I think it's another big reason to do a podcast like this is to share some of those experiences and learning and try to be a support to people that might not have had those same examples. And um, I think for both of us, we have big hearts for other people, and we want to be able to sort of share what we've learned, and maybe that can be helpful to somebody else.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
as people are listening to this podcast, if they maybe didn't have that experience, they want to ask some questions, or want to get some perspective on something, and just want a couple of non-grannies but influenced by grannies objective perspective, that's what we want to do, right? That's what we're here
Absolutely.
for.
You know, I think we have a lot to share. And,
Mm-hmm.
I certainly love to help people. I think we all do. I think our
Yeah.
family is really big on that.